Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church in Naperville, Illinois. I am Chris Cable, a member of your Board of Trustees. We are glad you are here, whether you're present in the sanctuary this morning or watching remotely. It is good to be together. We welcome you to our church and invite you to get to know us better during and after the service. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another in our spiritual and religious journeys while holding ourselves in covenant through our shared 7 principles. The mission of DuPage UU Church is to gather as an inclusive community, to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world towards fairness, love, and compassion. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, wherever you are in the world, you are welcome here. A couple announcements this week. This year's UUA Mid-America Region and General Assembly events are coming soon. We'd love to have you participate as an attendee or as a business meeting delegate. Find more information and links to more detail and to the delegate application form in the weekly DUU Connection email. More information will be communicated in the weeks for both assemblies, coming weeks for both assemblies. Living our values, we are collecting nominations for the 24-25 special collections. Each year we solicit, review, and choose nominees for a yearly lineup of local, not-for-profit organizations. As monthly special collection recipients, find a link to nominations in the weekly DUC Connection or email on Here's What's Happening page on our church website. Please submit your nominations by the end of March. The Committee on Shared Ministry, known as COSM, invites you to attend the last of 3 sessions to hear about the revised Covenant of Right Relations. This is the second revision based on congregational feedback received from the first 2 review sessions. The Covenant of Right Relations is our shared agreement on how we communicate and behave with each other. This final session will be on March 24th, 2024 at 10:15 in the sanctuary during the Adult Religious Education Hour. We look forward to your feedback on the revised covenant. Look for more information and a link to updated covenant in upcoming newsletters and weekly updates. We will vote to adopt the new Covenant of Right Relations at the annual meeting of the church in June 2024. Now, one more update from our capital campaign.
Hello. I'm Dean Reschke, and I am co-chair, along with Kat Gilder, of our Embracing Our Future capital campaign. Many of you were here for the kickoff celebration 5 weeks ago, and I'm sure you felt the joy of the day as we shined a light on the many times over the decades that this congregation has embraced its future through generosity of spirit. We had a lot to celebrate that day, and we sure did. You might remember we had a wonderful service, multi-gen service, a great catered brunch and games for young and old and face painting and a rock and roll band, and it was a blast. So what you don't know is that the joy has continued after that day, but quietly in living rooms and around kitchen tables. Right now we are just shy of our original goal, which was $1.15 million to eliminate our debt. That's kind of amazing. And now we almost are in a position to see out in the future here that we could eliminate all of our debt. You see, we owe $1 million to the bank and about $300,000 to generous members who gave us loans at the time we built this wonderful sanctuary. So retiring this debt will allow us to live into our future, and it's amazing the goodwill that we've experienced so far in this campaign. And I think that it's just going to continue. We hope to wrap up the campaign in about 6 weeks. If you haven't been visited by a member of our team yet, you will be in the next 6 weeks. We're also going to give folks, many of you, an opportunity to meet with us in cottage meetings. A lot of people find that more comfortable. Lastly, even if you think that you can't make a gift to this campaign, we'd like you to participate in the cottage meetings or individual visits, because we want to hear from you about what your hopes and wishes are for our future. So thank you.
Now, if you're online, I invite you to greet each other through the chat. And if you're present here, I invite you to turn to someone you did not come with and greet them with a wave and good morning greeting.
Welcome. So a little shout out to St. Patrick's Day. I, in my earlier career, was a software engineer and went to an engineering school. So since St. Patrick's is the patron saint of engineers, it was a very big deal when I was going to school. So. I am the Reverend Dr. Miriam Renaud. I am the community minister affiliated with this congregation, which means I'm not usually here in the pulpit on Sundays. I come once or twice a year. This is my second time this year. I minister to the community at large, so that's my role in this congregation. We are joined this morning, united in the efforts of faith. Faith in truth, in the growth of knowledge and understanding. Faith in love, in the labors and rewards of friendly living. Faith in people, in the power of human beings to build an earthly commonwealth of freedom and of peace. Faith in life, the life of all things, in service of perfect freedom and in the fullness of joy.
We light the chalice for the sixth source of our living tradition that draws from spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature.
Please rise in body and spirit and join us in hymn number 64, "Oh, Give Us Pleasure in the Flowers Today." Please join me in our covenant. We come together to affirm our relationship with one another, our shared commitment to our Unitarian Universalist principles, and to our DuPage UU Church community. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous in relationship with each other so that we might transform ourselves and the world. Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships we have with each other, our world, and creation. Each week we share our joys and concerns. The flowers today are from Elaine Waite, saying, "Welcome to spring and rebirth." We have another sorrow. On Monday morning, Reverend Mandy's father-in-law, Carmelo Ortega Fonseca, went to be with his ancestors. He adored his many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They were his legacy. He encompassed them in his love and care. He was also deeply rooted to his homeland. Boracay was his island and his proud heritage. Reverend Mandy and her family are in Puerto Rico for the funeral and will return Tuesday. Their family would welcome your thoughts and prayers. Even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us care for one another and for ourselves in all the ways that we can. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken, please join together in a moment of meditative silence.
It is time to gather. Our theme this month is renewal. And in the youth religious education lessons today, we will explore how we renew faith in ourselves by trusting our gifts. One such gift might be the ability to listen to nature and the environment around you. And these are gifts which you can trust because they are in you. They enable you to renew faith in yourself. They remind you that you can rely on yourself in challenging times. So today I have a story for you about listening to nature. It is Granddad's Prayer of the Earth by Douglas Wood, illustrated by P.J. Lynch. When I was little, my granddad was my best friend. Being with him always made the world seem just right. Granddad and I liked to go out for walks in the woods together. We didn't walk very far, or very fast, or very straight. And while we walked, I would ask him questions about things I wasn't sure of. "Why is it, Granddad?" I would ask, and "what if?" and "does it ever?" And one day, I asked my granddad about prayers. And for a long time, Granddad was quiet. And he didn't say anything until we came to the tallest trees in the forest. And then he answered with a question. "Did you know, boy," he whispered, "that trees pray?" I listened closely, but I couldn't hear them. "See how they reach for the sky," he said. "They reach and reach for clouds and sun and moon and stars. And what else is reaching for heaven but a prayer?" I thought about the trees and kept listening for them, and while I thought, I sat on an old mossy rock. "Rocks pray too," said Granddad. "Pebbles and boulders and old weathered hills, they are still and silent, and those are two important ways to pray." And I thought hard about the rocks, and I picked up a pebble and stuck it in my pocket. And we walked a little further and came to a small stream. And the water splashed and sparkled, and tiny fish hovered in the shadows. "Do streams pray too, Granddad?" I asked. "Streams pray too," he answered, "and lakes and rivers and waters of all kinds. Sometimes they pray silently, like the rocks, and they lie still and calm, reflecting clouds or birds or sunsets or the first evening star. And sometimes they pray with movement, flowing across the face of the earth, giving themselves to the ocean, giving themselves to the sky, and beginning their journey all over again. Sometimes waters pray with laughter, chuckling to their friends the rocks, and sometimes they pray by dancing, leaping into the air, and falling back again. "These are all ways to pray," said Granddad, "but there are more. The tall grass prays as it waves its arm beneath the sky, and flowers pray as they breathe their sweetness into the air, and the wind prays as it whispers and moans and sighs. It is saying a prayer and singing a hymn at the same time. A bird prays when it sings the first song of the morning, and it prays in that silent moment just before it sings. And the robin's last song at sundown is an evening prayer. All the beings of the world pray," said my Granddad, "as they slip through the forest or sparkle in the water, as they climb mountainsides or soar into the clouds or burrow into the earth. Each living thing gives its life to the beauty of all life, and that gift is its prayer." And then we were quiet, my Granddad and I, and he was watching something far away, and I was thinking about all he had said about rocks and trees and grass and birds and flowers. And finally, I asked him to tell me about the prayers of people. Well, Granddad smiled and ruffled my hair. "People pray some of the most wonderful prayers of all," he said. "And bending down to smell a flower can be a prayer," said my Granddad. "Quietly watching the sunrise, feeling the slow turning of the earth, and saying hello to a new day is one of the oldest prayers. Standing in a snowy woods on a winter day and watching your breath become part of the breath of the world is a way to pray. Making music or painting a picture can be a prayer. And holding hands around the table with family and friends, remembering all that holds us together and giving thanks is one of the greatest prayers. Sometimes," said Granddad, "people pray when they are sad or sick or lonely or have a problem too big or to carry by themselves. And they may say words that they have learned from their fathers or mothers or granddads or great-grandmothers, but often they must find their own words. The important thing to remember is that the words will always be right if they are real and true and come from the heart." So we had walked far enough, and Granddad said it was time to go back, but I had one last question. "Are our prayers answered, Granddad?" I asked. Well, Granddad smiled. "Most prayers are not really questions," he said, "and if we listen very closely, a prayer is often its own answer. Like the trees and winds and waters, we pray because we are here, not to change the world, but to change ourselves. because it is when we change ourselves that the world is changed. And my granddad and I went for many walks after that one, and I often listened for the prayers of the earth, but I was never sure that I heard them. And then one day my granddad was gone, and no matter how hard I prayed, he didn't come back. He couldn't come back. And I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I couldn't pray anymore. And so I didn't for a long time. And the world seemed dark and lonely without my granddad in it. Until one day I went for a walk, and I found a big rock under some tall trees and sat down on it. And overhead the branches swayed and a breeze whispered in the leaves, and I heard a stream flowing nearby and a robin singing from a honeysuckle bush. And I heard something else too, something in the sounds of breezes and birds and water. I heard prayers. The earth was praying just like my granddad said. So I joined in. Thank you, I prayed, for tall trees and sweet flowers, for still rocks and singing birds, and especially for my granddad. And as I prayed, something changed in me, and my granddad seemed somehow near. And for the first time in a long time, the world seemed just right. Let's sing to the children.
For our meditative prayer today, I would like to share parts of a prayer written by Rabindranath Tagore. Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might. Give me the strength to raise my mind high above daily trifles. So may it be. Please join me now in singing hymn number 112, Do You Hear? May rise in body or in spirit.
Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, in the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the heights on the plains, in the vale of the main, in the
What a perfect fit for Steve's story. And we didn't even do it on purpose. It's amazing. For you who attended the service I led in February, you'll recall that I painted a picture of Unitarian Universalism as firmly planted on the shoulders of several late 18th and early 19th century ministers, like the Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing and the Universalist minister Hosea Ballou. But today I want to share with you the religious naturalist theologies of two contemporary Unitarian Universalists. Their work emerged from the preoccupations of a small group of theologians working during the mid to late 20th century. This group of theologians, mainly working in the 1970s through the 1990s, fully embraced science. But they were troubled by the fact that evidence-based empirical knowledge of the universe left little to the imagination. So they asked this question: if religious people embrace a materialistic reality, how were they to preserve some idea of the divine, of the transcendent, or of the sacred? These theologians wanted to retain a sense of the sacred while remaining faithful to the non-sacred picture of the universe drawn by science. This small group included an unusually high number of Unitarian Universalists, unusual in part because there are not many Unitarian Universalist theologians, and I would say there are even fewer today than the number who were working during this time period. So I'm grateful for the opportunity today to tell you a bit about the theology of Jerome Stone, who's a longtime personal friend of mine and a mentor. And then a little later, I will describe the theology of Carl Peters, of whom I've been aware for a very long time, but have never met in person. I chose Stone and Peters because they propose theologies grounded in the everyday. Their theologies are attuned to the grace and joy that can be discovered in the ordinary if we simply pay attention. Their theologies also integrate an ethic, offering us guidance on how to be good people and how to lead responsible lives. And as an ethicist myself and a theologian, that component is important to me. Hymn 112, which we sang perfectly captures the religious naturalist theology of Jerome Stone, who is a philosopher by trade and a Unitarian Universalist minister. So let me tell you a little bit about Jerome Stone, Jerry Stone. He was born in 1934, grew up in Connecticut and Rhode Island. His father was a Congregationalist minister who thought of the Bible as a symbolic poetic text, and as such did not feel that it conflicted in any way with science. Stone has fond memories of riding in the car with his father on the way to church, and of their chats about rather esoteric topics like the differences between theism, deism, and theism, and atheism. He also had fond memories of the church youth group programs that he attended as a teenager, and how the youth would focus on doing good and on their responsibilities toward the world, so that these were his formative influences. He enrolled at the University of Chicago at the tender age of 16. It was there that he had a decisive realization. He'd been taught at church that dedicating oneself to being good and to doing good was a noble endeavor, but he began to see that accepting gifts of help and comfort from others and from the world was also important. Stone followed in his father's footsteps and became himself a Congregationalist minister. But as if serving a congregation and supporting a wife and by then 2 children wasn't enough, he decided to enroll in a doctoral program in theology again at the University of Chicago. It was there, as he began working on his dissertation, that he realized he'd lost his faith in a personal God. He also realized that he now viewed reality in purely naturalistic terms, which for him meant that there was nothing beyond this world. So given these views, how to complete a PhD in theology? Stone's advisor was adamant that all the world's religions point to something transcendent, something beyond the self. But he also told Stone that when pointing to something transcendent, the religions are not always pointing vertically towards something above. He suggested Stone focus his research on theologians whose work point in a horizontal direction towards something transcendent in this world. Stone found this approach congenial, and he was able to proceed with writing his dissertation. After graduating in 1973, he became a professor of philosophy at William Rainey Harper College, which is in Palatine. Eventually, Stone developed his own version of a transcendent, this world theology, sharing it with others in his best-known book, The Minimalist Vision of Transcendence, A Naturalist Philosophy of Religion, which was published in 1992. So his version of a minimalist vision of transcendence goes something like this. He eliminated the idea of God from his theology because he'd come to prefer the idea of the transcendent to the idea of God. However, he wanted to remain attentive to the sacredness of life's many blessings, which so often come from transcendent resources, which in his case mean resources outside of ourselves. To explain what he means by transcendent resources of blessing, Stone tells this story. This is common among philosophers. They turn to stories from their own lives to illustrate what they mean. So this is Stone's story. He just learned that his father had died, and he was sitting slumped in the living room on his sofa when his daughter, who was only 8 at the time, came home from school. So she could immediately see that something was very wrong and asked what was happening, and he told her that his father had died. And as soon as she heard, she cried out, "Oh, Dad," and threw her arms around him. He describes this as one of the most comforting and supportive moments of his life. For him, her hug was an unexpected and freely given gift of comfort and love. This gift of comfort and love was not the work of a personal God for him, but it wasn't just a mere event either. For Stone, his daughter's hug was sacred, a term that from his early days as a Congregationalist had always carried a notion of respect. Her hug was sacred. For him, the deep comfort and support he felt so powerfully at that moment came from outside of the situation. For him, it was a moment of transcendent grace. So Stone resists saying any more about this when it comes to identifying the origin of these gifts and of transcendent grace. However, because in his view, these explanations are an overreach and can't be defended, so he won't go there. Nonetheless, just because we refuse to speculate about the origin of these gifts doesn't mean we should cut ourselves off from them. They are, for Stone, important resources of grace, offering us renewal and meaning and healing. They're so important that Stone worries that the secularization of the West has undermined our ability to appreciate the sacredness of many of life's blessings. He hopes that secular humanists will not forget to be attentive to life's transcendent sacred goodness. Stone's theology is two-pronged, one might say. He is convinced that life's sacred blessings should be balanced by life's sacred judgment. While he holds tightly to the importance of grace, he also holds tightly to the value of judgment, because for him, judgment offers the possibility of critique and challenge. Just as he calls for the recovery of transcendent resources of grace, Stone calls for the recovery of transcendent resources of judgment. So here again, Stone likes to illustrate what he means with a story. And so this story is how, after Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered, some residents of the city of Evanston, where he lived, would take part in weekly marches to pressure the city to pass an open housing ordinance. At that time, it was still legal to refuse to rent or sell a house, including to Blacks and Jews. He hesitated to participate because he felt overwhelmed by his other responsibilities at the time. After all, he was a graduate student teaching, and he was teaching full-time and raising a family. But he also felt a sacred judgment coming from outside his daily routine, reminding him of the values that mattered to him most. This sense of sacred demand to act against Evanston's discriminatory housing practices motivated him to juggle his schedule so he too could join the marches. So he did. Just as Stone worries that Western secularization, or what he calls self-assured secularity, has led to a loss of resource of transcendent goodness, he worries it has led to a loss of resources of transcendent judgment. This, he fears, has led to a loss of any perspective from which to call into question our society as well as ourselves. So in the same way that Stone calls for the recovery of transcendent resources of grace, he calls for the recovery of transcendent resources of judgment. He is convinced that together, grace and judgment work together to deepen the human spirit. Stone characterizes his theology as a kind of religious naturalism rather than a kind of religious humanism. That's because for him, the aspects of human experience that are sacred or divine come from outside the human. So he conceives of the resources of grace and judgment as transcending the human, as resources beyond the human, even if they remain in the horizontal plane of nature. So I think that you'll agree that Stone's minimalist vision of transcendent theology aligns well with the theological affinities of many Unitarian Universalists. So perhaps not surprisingly, after he retired from teaching in 2001, Stone officially became a Unitarian Universalist. He used his credentials as a Congregationalist minister to become credentialed as a Unitarian Universalist minister. He taught at Meadville Lombard Theological School, one of our two UU seminaries, as an adjunct professor. And for nearly a decade, he served as a community minister at the Unitarian Church in Evanston. So we will move on to exploring the religious naturalist theology of Stone's colleague, Carl Peters. But to set the stage for Peters' version of religious naturalism, I've chosen a hymn to help express the basic contours of Peters' theology. So please join me now in singing hymn number 346, Sing a Song with Me. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Come
be seated. Carl Peters is of the same generation as Jerry Stone. He was born in 1939, making him just 5 years younger than Stone. For several decades, Peters taught world religions, environmental ethics, and religion and science at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. He also served as editor of the Journal of Religion and Science called Zygon, a journal in which I have been published. Peters is a longtime Unitarian Universalist who founded and was the first president of the University Unitarian Universalist Society of Central Florida. And like Stone, Peters taught as an adjunct professor at Melville Lombard Theological School for several years. Peters' best-known book of theology, published in 2002, is Dancing with the Sacred: Evolution, Ecology, and God. His theology, as you can tell from the title of his book, is more explicitly grounded in science than Stone's. Indeed, Peters draws on ideas of Darwinian evolution and his description of nature as constantly changing. Peters does not recognize God as a separate entity at work in the world. For Peters, evolution is an ad hoc process in which molecular changes occur by chance and may or may not turn out to be positive adaptations to the existing environment. The copying errors that occur in cells, altering the molecular structure of existing species and bringing a new species into being, are not part of some grand design. For Peters, they have no greater purpose. They just happen. They're part of an endless unfolding of molecular variation and selection that is taking place with no one at the helm. For Peters, Darwinian evolution shows us that all of nature is constantly a whirl, shifting, moving, spinning, turning back on itself, pivoting, leaping forward in a spontaneous dance. The endless, unguided creativity of molecular change is a dance. There are, of course, rules to this dance. Physics and chemistry determine what is possible. Likewise, we humans, we dance. Limited only by the rules of our society, we whirl and spin and pivot and leap with each other in unexpected and improvisational ways. Peters acknowledges that viewed through a religious lens, the constant creativity in nature giving rise to, quote, new structures, new life forms, new thoughts, unquote, can be ascribed to God. In this case, we are, and the world is dancing with God. Dance with me, this creativity says, which is God. Follow my lead. But Peters admits of no God in the traditional sense, because he believes that science can unmask any attempt to prove that a divine hand guides Darwinian evolution. He takes instead what he calls a naturalistic view of the sacred. For him, it is not dancing with God that is sacred, but the dance itself. It is enough simply to dance, a dance in which no one is leading. We are to dance with one another and the world merely for the sake of dancing, heading in no particular direction, setting no goal with no purpose other than to dance. The invitation is no more and no less than, come dance. And when we accept the invitation and give ourselves over to the sacred dance, we make life worthwhile, because to dance with no one leading means to be open, to pay attention, to trust, and to love all there is. To dance is to embrace fully every moment and to revel in the joy of being in sacred relationship. So, like Stone and every good philosopher, Peters offers a story from his personal life to illustrate his version of religious naturalism. His story is of not having spoken to a very dear friend for many, many, many years. When they finally spoke on the phone, it seemed as if they'd never been apart. They talked for hours without effort. The words flowed with ease. And Peters decided that the reason for this ease was that neither he nor his friend had any other goal than to talk. They weren't trying to accomplish anything. They were completely focused on the other, letting the conversation take them where it may. He was dancing with his friend. No one was trying to take the lead. No one was trying to control the relationship. No one was attempting to set the pace or take the direction, the conversation in one direction or another. So this led Peters to a moral understanding, and that's where that ethical component of his theology comes in. So when you are dancing with someone and that person is leading, they are in control. The fact that you're expected to follow them can result in domination and dependence, says Peters. So he offers an ethic, a moral way of life that represents an alternative to Stone's transcendent resources of judgment. For Peters, the call to come dance means to embrace a way of being in the world where no one leads, where the leading is a back and forth sharing, where each party responds to the subtle movements, touches, features, and words of the other. And there I was quoting Peters. Over time, he's convinced this creates beautiful patterns of creative friendship, partnership, and family ties. So I hope that, like Peters, from here on out, even in your bleakest hour, you will hear the small, still voice of life inviting you to come dance and find joy in doing so. So I want to end today by speculating that perhaps most of you have never heard of Jerome Stone or Carl Peters. So here I insert my own personal cri de coeur. I am an academic theologian by training, and I've written a book of theology. I've published 2 edited volumes and have several articles under my belt. And yet I would venture that most of you have never heard of my theological work. I am told that I may be the only Unitarian Universalist theologian who actually came out of the Unitarian Universalist tradition. So most of our UU theologians were converts from other traditions. But we are not alone, Jerome Stone, Carl Peters, and I. There are other theologians of whom you might not also have heard. There's Anthony Pinn, Dan McCannon, Rebecca Parker, Sharon Welch, Tandaica, and there are more. They are mostly of an older generation, and so I hope some of you who are out there will hear my cri de coeur and think about going down the path of becoming a UU theologian. But I do hope that our brief excursion into the work of Stone and Peters this morning have inspired you to learn more about their theologies as well as the theologies of other contemporary Unitarian Universalists. Can I hear an amen? Thank you.
The giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community. Your contribution supports the programs and operations of DuPage UU Church. Giving is also how we live our values in the world. Each month, we share our offerings with an organization nominated by the congregation and selected by the special offering team. In March, our special collection will benefit Riverwalk Adult Daycare Services, formerly Ecumenical Adult Daycare. This organization was founded in 1983 by a group of 15 religious institutions who recognized the desire and benefits for adults to age in place at home, but who could not be left at home alone. Riverwalk Adult Day Services has provided over 700,000 hours of service to participants, allowing their caregivers the peace of mind knowing that their loved ones are being cared for in a safe and nurturing environment. Their mission is to provide a safe, social, stimulating environment for adults in need of daytime care. The morning's offering to support the work of DuPage UU Church and of the Riverwalk Adult Daycare Services is given and received in the spirit of generosity and gratitude.
I leave you with these words. May peace dwell within your hearts and understanding in your minds. May courage steel your wills and love of truth forever guide you.
Please join me. We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.